Police, what is the absolute worst crime scene you've come across? Content warning, as assault and graphic descriptions of violence and gore. Story 1. My friend's dad is a cop. Keep in mind this was during a really bad ice storm a few years ago and in the country about a good 15 to 20 minutes from a town and wasn't a very busy road. Got called from a woman saying she hadn't talked to her mom in a few days, which was weird since they talked every day. Went to check on her, drove up to the address and saw a truck sitting in the gate. Got out and walked up, didn't see anything in or around the truck, decided to walk past. That's when I saw it. Old lady was by the mailbox. She fell into a puddle and had literally frozen over. Fire department had come to basically burn her out. Then I decided to walk up to the house after calling in what happened. Door was slightly open, so I walked in and announced myself. No answer. Went around, and her husband had died staring out the window at her. He was handicapped and in a wheelchair, didn't have any power in the house for a week, and didn't have a cell phone. He died watching his wife freeze to death. Dear God, this is sad. I know a lot of these stories are hard to hear, and I often question whether or not I'll actually record them. I actually don't record quite a few. But some of these, as sad as they are reminders of ways we should be careful, things we should consider, do different, all that, to protect ourselves and those we love. I don't blame anyone who can't stomach hearing some of these, just as I can't stomach the ones I don't record. But don't hear these without taking some possible lessons from them. Story 2. I work at a police department reviewing old cases. I'd say the worst I've ever come across so far was an older man who was found dead in his home by his son. Doesn't sound too bad at first until you see/realize that he was found kneeling next to his bed, pants around his knees, Playboy on the bed in front of him, and dong still in his hand. Dead 2 days and found by his son mid-fap. Actually, you would be amazed by how many corpses are found photographed partially or fully naked. A lot of them are found in the bathroom with their pants down, collapsed on the floor, with poop in the toilet/on the floor/on the person. I'd say 80% of our untimelies are found partially naked with poop somewhere nearby. Story 3. Not me, but my police trade school teacher told me a story of such a fricked up crime scene he was a part of. There was this beautiful woman who could have been a model, and she was naked on the floor of her hotel room, her head not attached to her body, and blood everywhere. The entire hotel was a crime scene, and my teacher kept seeing cops sneak in to see the hot dead chick, and my teacher, who had command, was furious. Kicked them all out and tried to do his job, until his higher up, I think a lieutenant, came in by asking around, "I heard the hot headless chick was here." Since he was a higher rank, the second he stepped in, he took command of the scene, and my teacher never did find out what happened, except some cops care more about seeing a hot corpse than doing their job. I'm pretty sure being headless takes a corpse from hot to not. I'm pretty sure calling a corpse hot is really disturbing. I don't care how desensitized you are to violence and whatnot. First, show some respect, and second, if you are in a room covered in blood looking at a dead body and getting excited, maybe you should go to therapy. Story 4. The Icicle Man. Outside of a smaller city in Idaho, population 27,000, is a kind of shanty town affectionately known as Welfare. The only business is a little convenience store where a lady runs out of her house. Welfare ID has at least a 90% unemployment rate. Anyways, it's the dead of winter and around -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Get a call about a missing person. A man of 70 hasn't been seen or heard from in over a month. Get to his trailer home and come across the following scene. Man's gas had been shut off due to lack of payment, but electricity was still on. Man had a waterbed with an electric heater to warm the water. Looks like a man had been stabbed on the bed. He rotted down to essentially a soup-like consistency. His liquefied remains had dribbled off the edge of the heated waterbed to form intricate icicles off the edge. The Icicle Man was the absolute worst. I'm sorry, how is a population of 27,000 a shanty town? My hometown has a population under 20,000 and has an 8-screen theater, multiple big box stores, several hotels, many chain and private restaurants, and a community college. If 27,000 is a shanty town, I must have grown up in a hole in the ground. Story 5. Saw a little kid standing on a busy street corner in the dead of winter around 2 or 3 years old. Went up to him to talk to him and found out he had been standing out there for an hour or so while a good Samaritan kept eyes on him from across the street in his nice and warm house. Eventually led the investigation back to a battered woman's shelter nearby. The manager recognized the kid and said his mom was upstairs in another room. Went up there and found out she died from an H overdose a few days prior. Broke my heart to think that kid had been in that room with his dead mother for days with little food or water, probably crying that his mother wouldn't wake up or talk to him. Dunno whatever happened to him after that. Lost kids are common in my city, but this one wasn't just the forgetful tourist who didn't keep track of their kid while they snapped photographs everywhere. Was intense for a while as we pulled resources from neighboring countries to put out the alerts for a priority lost child. See, no one explains how stuff like this can affect you when you let it into your life. No one warned me, and fricking heck yeah, holding my babies is the only thing that really helps. Story 6. Journalist, not the police, but I was often at the same sorts of scenes. 1. Partial decapitation in a car accident. A drunk kid hit a small car at high speed, tore the top completely off. Driver's body was still heaving and convulsing in the front seat, brains and tongue splattered over groceries in the back seat. 2. Hugely obese drug dealer goes into his attic to retrieve his stash. This is in Georgia in the summer. Collapses from the heat, neighbors a few days to notice the smell. Takes a little more before they figure out where exactly it's coming from. The police had to cut a hole in the roof of the house to pull his bloated corpse out. He fell apart into goo as they were doing it. The smell was insane, even a quarter mile down the road once the roof was opened up. 3. Woman who had been killed by a serial killer, unofficially. The cops on the scene said they had seen this sort of thing a number of times, so they thought it was a serial killing. Was never proven. She was a prostitute and he had beaten her to death and then tightly packed all of her orifices with dirt before dumping her. 4. Train versus car. A mom tried to beat a train with her kids in the car. Train was too fast. When I got to the scene, there was a child's head just sitting on the ground. Completely normal except for the fact that it was detached and the body was nowhere in sight. People who try to beat trains are idiots. No amount of time saved is worth risking your life, and especially not the lives of your children. I know a lot of us get behind the wheel and feel that need to save time and go faster, but just weigh the risks, folks. Some just aren't worth taking. Story 7. I'm no cop, but my stepfather wanted me to tell his story. Here goes. My father got a call about a car crash. Usually they're pretty bad, but this was one of the worst he'd ever seen. The car had 2 parents and 4 kids inside. The parents were pulled out immediately and neither had serious injuries. They were both understandably scared about their children, so he put on some rubber gloves and went into the flipped car. All of them were dead. And none were clean deaths. The youngest's spine was protruding from his back, and the oldest was missing most of his head. Another had a face mangled by debris, and the last one was cut in the abdomen by a seatbelt, and there were a fair amount of organs hanging out. He had no clue what to do. He didn't want those parents to see that, so he wrapped them up inside of the car. When the mother, and after that they'd taken the bodies, he was there to clean up and investigate. While he was searching, he found a small, bloody sock sitting on the ground. He told me the only time he's ever cried on the job. In his words, I've seen grown men blow their brains out. I've seen people beat their spouses until their face was mush. Heck, I even had to reach into someone's chest cavity once to resuscitate them, but I'll never forget those kids. God bless your daddy. I hope he finds peace. Story 8. I'm not in law enforcement, but ended up working very closely with them on one case that was presented to my ER. A newborn infant had been microwaved by her mother's boyfriend because she wouldn't stop crying. The baby's uncle found the baby and got enough neighbors gathered to set the boyfriend on fire. Police came in first with the baby. They gave me a heads up that the boyfriend might follow, but they decided to wait for an ambulance to show up and transport him. Story 9. I'm not a cop, but a good friend of mine is, and he recently told me a story. A few weeks ago, he got a call about a homicide. A 25-year-old male had killed a 63-year-old male. The victim was a father to a 17-year-old high school girl, a known thug/drug dealer. The girl's parents had tried to tell her she couldn't date him, but she did it anyway as an act of rebellion. Long story short, the guy stabbed the father about 30 times with a chef's knife found in the owner's kitchen after an argument ensued. The argument was over him not dating his daughter. Looks like Dad was right. When my buddy, the cop, showed up and said the whole kitchen was literally covered in the man's blood, he said the corpse looked like a sliced cow carcass. Both the girl and her mother were sitting in their dead husband's blood, crying hysterically. And this, kids, is why you listen to your parents. Story 10. Cop here. Not the worst crime scene, but an interesting one. I was dispatched to a call where the wife found her husband unresponsive in his office. I showed up, the room is dark, and I find the man in his chair in front of his computer screen. The screen husband's death due to the room being dark, his close proximity to the desk, and her reluctance to approach the body. Some time passes, the ME shows up with a body removal, and the guy is wheeled away. As I'm wrapping up the scene and the wife is in another room with the family, my curiosity gets the best of me. I know for a fact that at his age, the guy needed some visual stimulus at a minimum to prime the pump. Remembering that the computer was on but the screen had shut off, I reached for the mouse. When I moved the mouse, the screen turned on to Holy Dear God of all that is horrible on the internet. Let's get one thing straight. As a male, I have seen my fair share of what is out there in the naked world, but what popped up on that screen was about 20 open tabs of the darkest adult entertainment the darkest parts of the web had to offer. What struck me most was the amount of painful-looking gay torture adult entertainment this guy was open. Not gonna lie, at this point I felt like a teen again, afraid my mom was gonna walk in at any moment. I was at a crossroad. Do I break the news to his grieving wife and family a couple rooms over? Heck no. I closed all those tabs and hoped this guy was browsing in private. To the dead guy, I hope I was a bro to you even though I didn't know you. And if anyone ever finds me in that same situation, please do the same for me. Rest in peace, dead guy. Yeah, I'm all for honesty, but if a family just lost their dad, probably best not to pile that news on top of everything. Let them grieve a little more peacefully with the lie. I'm not sure if that's right or not, but I would probably do the same. Story 11. Not in the police, but I just finished serving on a jury for a capital murder trial a couple of weeks ago. Basically, a guy beat his 2-year-old son to death, and during sentencing, it came out that he molested his 4-year-old daughter as well. As part of the trial, we had to view all the forensic photos of this poor kid. 84 bruises, 15 broken ribs, head contusions, brain hemorrhage, lacerated intestines, and the list went on and on. Most of the jurors were shaking with rage when we returned to the jury room that day. Story 12. I wasn't on the call itself, but was relieving units who needed a break. They were dispatched to a home after the father came home to a grisly scene. Apparently, he and his wife were having marital problems. They had 3 kids. Not sure what the issue was, but the next day, after a huge argument, the husband went to work. While at work, the wife said, "I'll show him." She took his loaded shotgun and while the kids were napping, shot them one by one. First the toddler, then the middle child. The oldest woke up. She consoled him until he fell asleep and then shot him as well. Then she left a heartfelt note about how it was all his fault that she did this. She then blew her head off in the foyer for him to find when he got home. He came home to lose his entire life. That was one of the most disturbing and vile things I've ever experienced. I've grown to feel numb to almost anything due to this job, but that one still makes me sad. I'm not sure what happened afterwards, but I believe he killed himself months later. Who can blame him? These last few stories were hard to read. To hear about things being done to children like that, I can't understand a mind that would do that. Story 13. I'm a bit late to the party, but here goes. My stepfather worked in traffic homicide for years and encountered any number of frankly gruesome things, but the story I remember really sticking out in my mind involved a car hitting an electric pole on a rainy night. The car's occupant had, in the course of the accident, become decapitated, head sheared completely off. The electric pole was severely damaged, one of the lines breaking and falling down to rest in a puddle, which now also contained the severed head. The electric charge was apparently causing the head to bounce and sizzle in a very disconcerting fashion, to put it lightly. Story 14. Not completely what Opie is looking for, but a horrible scene nonetheless. My grandfather's friend was a truck driver for many years, and one night while he was driving, a car swerved across the median and hit his truck head-on. Killed everyone inside the car, and to make it worse, they had just crossed into America illegally, so this small sedan had about 6 more people than it should have held stuffed into hollowed-out places. So when he hit the car, a red mist just exploded out. He had people stuck up under the hood of his truck, and it was a huge mess. Fricked him up for a while. Probably picked up any responding officers, too. I had an old coworker who used to drive the 18-wheeler for our company and had a man commit self-termination by walking out in front of his truck. He could no longer drive or ride in a vehicle after that, would ride his bike or walk to work. I hope your grandfather's friend ended up being somewhat okay after. I'm sure it's hard to come back from that. Story 15. I once went to a scene where an ex-boyfriend showed up at a house where the girl lived. He knocked and then started firing a shotgun through the door, hitting a toddler. He then went in and shot the girl's mother. I still remember chunks of flesh and underarm hair stuck to the wall. Shot the father and then left. The girl was out for the evening. He then left the gun and a self-termination note at the top of a bridge. He went on the run instead of killing himself and was captured shortly thereafter by the marshals. Fricked up scene. Story 16. My father-in-law is a retired state trooper. He was called to respond to the 2-vehicle accident near his home. That's where he spent his final minutes with his wife before she died trapped in her vehicle. Story 17. There was a post on here a while ago from a cop where some guy grabbed a baby, put it under his arm, and ran at the wall using the baby's head as a battering ram. The baby somehow survived, and the guy was arrested. The restraint an officer must have to arrest someone like that and not just lose it. To see someone who has done that to a baby and not have your vision go red? How? I know due process is important, but freaking A. Story 18. A bunch come to mind. Hard to rank them because they're all so unique. One was a 95-year-old lady who lived alone and stopped answering phone calls from her son. He went to her house and found her about a week later. She died while in the bathtub. Her head was resting on the edge of the tub, looking up with her mouth extremely wide open. She had hundreds of bugs pouring out of her eyes, nose, and mouth. It was straight out of a horror movie. You could smell it from the front porch. I felt really bad for her son. No one should ever have to see their mother like that. Story 19. Posting on behalf of my friend sitting next to me. Worst crime I've been to was 6-month-old baby being thrown out a 6-story window because the mother believed she was possessed by the devil. Story 20. Currently just a volunteer, but hoping to hold the official title and role soon. A few months back, there was a call out to someone who had jumped in front of a train. Fairly certain it was done purposefully, but no one knows for sure, and I haven't followed up on it. Lady had her legs severed and her stomach area was caved inwards, sort of like in those cartoons where their stomachs are flat against the road after being run over, but with more intestines and stuff that had burst out of various exit points from was given the option to go home for the day after that, but decided to stay. Some guy later in the day called us good-for-nothing pigs, which made me realize how quick people are to judge us without even knowing what we do or have to deal with. Was very new to it at this point. Not a good day. Story 21. This is a story I got from a local police lieutenant during an interview for a college paper. It was Halloween night and my campus had a somewhat notorious Halloween party throughout town. Police actually walk the streets in riot gear that night and normally get a lot of nice costumes. Anyway, they get a call to break up a fight at a house party. They arrive and are trying to push through all the drunk people to find who's actually fighting. They got to the fight, which was actually taking place the next house over on a sidewalk, but a second too late. They watched as one kid pushed the other in front of a speeding tow truck, basically causing this kid's body to explode into a bloody mess. I think the kid who pushed him got involuntary manslaughter or something like that. Story 22. Attended scene/autopsy of a 13-year-old who was hunting with his 11-year-old brother and accidentally shot him dead center in the back of the head with a slug meant for a deer. The kid looked bad enough when there and had already expired. His face looked like a face hugger if you want context. Feel really bad for the brother as he attempted to do CPR and stuff, obviously in a panic as his brother was likely just expelling blood everywhere and not actually still alive. This poor kid will not only remember shooting his little brother, but actually seeing the aftermath and putting his face on it. Obviously far worse for the kid than anyone else. Story 23. This one's a bit of a cliche and not really a crime scene. Few-month-old DOA. Elderly woman with no family, just 2 dogs. Family out of state asked for us to check on her. Got into her apartment. She had been dead a few months. Other than the smell, the sight of her eaten off fingers by the starving dogs that were there. Old folks living alone seems to not be a good idea. Story 24. Cop friend of mine was first on the scene to that monkey ripping that woman's face off in Connecticut. He had serious PTSD after that. I remember hearing about that happening, and that's why I'm always really cautious around any kind of wild animal, even tamed ones. I feel just awful for that woman. Story 25. M Police. 1. Man who had his head chopped away down to his chin by a M-head with a tobacco knife. Said M-head had previously been cutting the grass with the knife before flipping his lid and removing the victims. 2. Fatal wreck where a man hit a loaded dump truck head-on. His vehicle disintegrated pretty much. He slid on the pavement, grinding his legs off to the upper thigh, scattered most of his body along the roadway. 3. An elderly man died while under a heating blanket, cooked low and slow for a couple of days. 4. Lady died in a bathtub. This makes people stew. Water bodies suck. It goes on and on. They all have their little quirks that make them the worst in their own unique, special snowflake kind of way. Story 26. Former paramedic here. Was called to a murder scene, not for the victim, but for a rookie female cop who started vomiting and then became catatonic at the scene. A woman had killed her husband with a blast from a shotgun. He was drunk, naked, and farted right in her face at the dinner table. She got the gun, shoved it into his stomach, fired, and blew the back half of his torso away. Then, after he was already dead, she put it in his mouth and blew his head off. The cop was unable to continue and resigned a few days later. Story 27. My dad used to work for the DEA. He told me about how they figured out the cartels used to use stillborns and orphans to traffic drugs. They would kill the kids and preserve them so that they could stitch C and H inside their body. They would hand the stuffed kids off to a girl that looked like a mom and would pretend their kids were sleeping while crossing the border. Went on for years until a drug dog attacked one of the stuffed infants and C snowing everywhere. Story 28. I was on vacation in Tokyo a long time ago. Strolling through the streets one day, I came to a train crossing and several pedestrians stopped as the train approached. One guy, a mid-50s salaryman in a cheap suit, turned to me, put his finger over his lips and said, "Shh," then jumped in front of the train. It happened so fast I couldn't tell what happened. It was like he was there looking me in the eyes, then he took a step back and was replaced by a train. Still shakes me to this day even though I have no idea what happened or why. There was something casual about it. He wasn't totally insane or disheveled. He looked like a guy on his way home from work. Just my reminder, folks, if you are contemplating things like that, please talk to someone, preferably a therapist if you can. Your life has value. And to those of you who have witnessed anything like this, the same goes for you. Seeing traumatic things like this can mess you up, and getting help can be good. Otherwise, thanks for watching and stay safe out there. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.